For 3 different weeks over the last month or two, I've been sharing my updated version of Ted Animan's 5-Foot Shelf of Magic. In case you missed those episodes, the 50,000-foot overview on this is that Ted Animan, almost 90 years ago, postulated that if you had one 5-foot shelf of magic and filled it with the books that he recommended, then read those, you would be conversant on almost any topic within magic, and you could take yourself from being an absolute beginner to someone who could perform and know as much as basically anyone about magic. I've attempted to update that list because obviously many of the titles he suggested are no longer in print, and even though I did this a few years ago, some of those books have gone out of print. I am more or less holding myself to the actual physical dimensions of 1 foot for each of these 5-foot sections that I'm sharing with you. This is part 4, and I'm confident that you're going to like the books that I have on this list. In each of the previous 5-foot sections, I have focused on more or less one specific area of magic, and this segment is no different. It's pretty easy for you and me to get caught up in the latest and greatest magic book. That's always what's being thrown at us in all of the emails that we're subscribed to. But in this 4th foot of my 5-foot shelf of magic, I want to focus on some old masters, magicians and creators who are worth studying for specific reasons, and we're going to get into that with each one of these books. The first book on the 4th foot of my 5-foot shelf of magic is Martin Gardner's Impromptu. This book was written by Steranko and put out by The Miracle Factory, which we've touched on one of their other books before. It's a huge book, chock full of all kinds of magic. And the focus, as you can imagine from the title, is on impromptu magic. The tricks themselves are pulled from the pages of Hugard's Magic Monthly, where Martin Gardner wrote a monthly column about impromptu magic, things that you could perform anywhere, anytime, with whatever happens to be around you. So really what this means is this is a great way to capture this material if you don't want to have to pursue the entire Hugard's Magic Monthly series. Now, if you already own Hugard's Magic Monthly, which is another great resource, then you have all of the impromptu tricks as originally written up. But impromptu magic is such an important facet of everything that we do. It's important to know how to do some tricks when you're out and about. And as I wrote about this week in the Erudite Magic Digest, it's particularly important for the family and friends performer who wants to be able to share some magic with people when they're sitting at a restaurant or at their house and they're not sure about the props that are going to be around. As is typical with any Miracle Factory release, it doesn't just stop with the tricks from the original Hugard's Magic Monthly. There are also other items from Martin Gardner's notes. There's correspondence between him and others, and a whole host of other history and interesting things about Martin Gardner. If you're looking for ways to perform more impromptu magic, I think that this is a great resource and worthy of your consideration. How appropriate that the second book on this list is actually a pair of books from one of magic's most respected performers and thinkers. You might be getting ahead of me if you know magic books, but I'm talking about the Books of Wonder by Tommy Wonder. This is the kind of book that a lot of us like to read. Part theory, but also applied theory, because you're going to learn tricks from the repertoire of someone who was at the top of his game when he was alive and performing. He won all kinds of awards for his magic, including FISM, recognition from the Academy of Magical Arts, and even a posthumous FISM award for theory and philosophy. So what you're getting when you buy these books are his thoughts on how magic should be performed. And one of the things that I love about reading these books is that his arguments are so clearly thought out and articulated. If you disagree, you have an uphill battle facing you because he's just so logical and progresses you along with how he thinks about magic and how he thinks you should be thinking about your magic. Then he gives you a trick that seems to illustrate perfectly the point that he was trying to make and how he applied this work to his own magic, so you know that it's not just pie in the sky. These books were written with Stephen Minch from Hermetic Press, so you know that they're absolutely gorgeous, detailed, and have beautiful line drawings throughout to illustrate exactly what you need to do. You'll learn tricks with all kinds of objects, cards, coins, his famous chop cup routine, as well as his ring, watch, and wallet. Not everything is going to be practical for you, but I guarantee you the thinking behind it will apply to what you're trying to do, and you'll be able to improve your magic by adding these books to your shelf. Speaking of old school impromptu style magic, this next book embraces all of that. In fact, the subject of this book was well known for elaborate preparation so that when someone asked to see some magic, they were prepared to amaze them as if the entire thing were impromptu, but in fact had been planned weeks, months, or sometimes even years in advance. The book is Max Malini, King of Magicians, written by Steve Cohen and put out by Squash Publishing. This book is an absolutely gorgeous tribute to one of magic's most famed characters. Malini was a short, stout German magician who made his name performing for the most famous people in America, and then later took his magic on tour around the world performing for kings, dignitaries, robber barons, or anyone who would get him some fame in the newspaper. On the surface, that may not sound appealing to you. However, the magic that he did was practical and usable even to this day. The book is thorough in giving both a history of Mellini, his tours around the world, some of his correspondence, but also all of the tricks that he routinely used, and you're getting some of the updated handlings that Steve Cohen has adopted in his own performances. I've done a full review of this book if you'd like to learn more about it. There were some aspects of it that I didn't care for, but I still think that it's a great blending book of the history, magic, and updates that you're sure to like. The next book is one that was popularized by a famous magician, and in fact, I have kind of a controversial take about it. However, enough magicians have studied this and think that it's worthwhile that I want you to be aware of it. The book is Expert at the Card Table by S.W. Erdnase. Now, one of the reasons that this book is so famous is because we really don't know who Erdnase was. There have been a lot of theories put out there by famous magicians trying to make their mark and establish who the author really was. There is really no consensus among magicians, but it's something they enjoy debating. The book itself isn't all that big and deals with both gambling, cheating, and magic in two separate sections of the book. As far as I can tell, the book was relatively obscure for magicians until Dai Vernon made it famous. He discovered it as a child and made it his Bible. He was interested in learning not only the magic in it, but the gambling moves, and ended up thinking that it was a really great book, and then preached that gospel to anyone who would listen, which happened to be a lot of magicians. So if you want to see what all the fuss is about from this early 1900s book by an author we don't know anything about, check out Expert at the Card Table. Speaking of Dai Vernon, it's actually become harder and harder to find books in print that are directly from the professor's working repertoire. There are a few ebooks, but the book that I want to focus on isn't strictly a book about Dai Vernon's magic, even though it includes a large selection from him. The book is Stars of Magic, originally published by Tannins and now printed by My Magic. I love this book for a lot of reasons, and most of those reasons have to do with the classic nature. It's a compilation of pamphlets that were put together by the Stars of Magic in the 40s and includes some classic magic plots that have now become basically ubiquitous. Tricks like Triumph, Coins Through the Table, there's a version of the Cups and Balls in there, Cutting the Aces, Spellbound, the Homing card, the Ambitious card, the Travelers, and even some lapping work by Slidini. There's also an overlap if you're buying this book with some of the Mellini items. Vernon wrote up the color change that he used as well as a card stab, and so you'll have some duplication between this and the Mellini book, but it's not enough to worry about. I still think that Stars of Magic has some of the most performable close-up magic ever written, and it's astounding that it's as cheap as it is given all the excellent magic in it. Speaking of good value and pamphlets, Don's Magic and Books is sponsoring this episode, and he wants you to know about a sale that he's running this week specifically for erudite magicians. There's a lot of great magic in pamphlets, and Don recognizes that, which is why he's offering you 30% off if you buy booklets or pamphlets from his website and use the code erudite at checkout. Not only does he have smaller pamphlets, he also offers normal books and even books that are rare and hard to find. Once you start shopping with Don, I know you'll never go back. He has great customer service and fast and free shipping if you meet certain minimum thresholds in the United States. I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to his website and tell him that I sent you by using code erudite at checkout. Now, normally when I do these book lists, I try to keep it to books that are physically in print. This next one isn't still available physically, although it may be coming back in the future, but you could still get a PDF version of it. This is a student of Dai Vernon, so even though it's becoming harder to find these direct Dai Vernon books, this one has received some of the highest praise from the professor himself. The book is The Classic Magic of Larry Jennings. Larry Jennings studied with the professor out at the Magic Castle and ended up developing and publishing quite a few of his own tricks. This book was a compilation of some of his best material at the time, and in my opinion has stood the test of time. If you like close-up magic that's really not that hard to do, but will teach you some great sleights and some interesting magic, then consider The Classic Magic of Larry Jennings. It's not just cards, although that is the primary focus. There are some other items, including cups and balls and coins. One of the things that I love about it is that you're not just getting Larry Jennings moves, you're also getting things that he learned from the professor, from Leipzig, from Fred Fred Capps. And so it's one of those books that gives you a lot of slights and material from a lot of different thinkers, but all from Larry's perspective as their student. If you've read the book, or any of these books for that matter, sound off down below with what some of your favorites are from each of them. Whenever I do these magic videos, I find that most magicians don't seem that interested in history. And I hope to change your mind. But even if I don't, I still think that I need to talk about magic history, because if we don't study and learn from past masters or understand the history of our art, then I don't think that we could actually call it art. Which is why this next book, or set of books, depending on what your preference is so important. The books are the classic correspondence series by Mike Caveney. I've talked about these many times because they're some of my favorite books to read. These are letters from magicians to each other, or magicians to one of their vendors or customers. Basically anything that has to do with magic, and people wrote some letters. Mike Caveney unearthed these letters from history and has broken them down for us. So you get the original letter, he's scanned it in a very artful, tasteful way. He has transcribed it so that you don't have to try to read someone's actual handwriting. And then he has annotated each of the letters with both a prelude, footnotes, and endnotes to help you understand the situation, what's going on, why this letter is important, and who all of the key players are. It is a great way to learn your magic history, since it's just so fun to read about the gossip or the idea of a new trick or some sort of world tour report from one of these magicians, where they were traveling, who they were with, what was going on, and what was important in the world of magic at that time. There are 4 different versions of this book, and they're not in any particular order, so pick one that sounds interesting or is available right now and start there. My guess is you'll enjoy them as much as I do, and then want to buy some of the others. I've touched on the importance of theory in some of my previous lists, and indeed in other videos, but I also wanted to give you a resource on this shelf that's inexpensive and noteworthy. Magic and Showmanship by Henning Nelms has really stood the test of time in terms of offering you practical performance theory and advice. Yes, it's older, so it's written in a slightly different style than something that was just written yesterday, but that also gives it some character and advice that has helped so many magicians over the decades. The book will help you develop your own persona and character on stage. He deals with basic blocking and tackling of how to move about the stage, developing your act. But it's not just the theory, he also teaches you some tricks that go along with the points that he's making. If you don't have any magic theory books, this is a good one to start with, because the price is right. Because it's so old, it's very inexpensive, and you'll no doubt get a lot of value based on the amount that you spend. Even if you only get one idea that you put to use, it'll be well worth it, and that's why I recommend it for your shelf. The next book was written by a magician who created what was at one point considered the greatest card trick of all time. The trick is out of this world, and you can find a variation or two within the pages of this book. The magician is Paul Curry, and the book is Worlds Beyond. The book contains 77 items from one of magic's most prolific thinkers from the 1940s through the 1970s. One of the things that I love the most about this era of magic is that it seemed like so many of the magicians weren't boxed into one particular type of magic. So while Paul Curry is probably best known for card tricks, there are items in here with ropes, mentalism, and many other facets of magic. And each one is incredibly devious and interesting. I feel like Paul Curry doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves, but you can change that by checking out this book. Oh, and there's another little benefit. It's flying below the radar, so if you get this book and learn some of these tricks, my guess is you'll have some magic in your arsenal that no one else is currently doing. Last but certainly not least, for this section of my 5-foot shelf of magic is the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks. Gene Hugard is one of the most notable names in this old school style of writing up magic, and the Encyclopedia of Magic Tricks is exactly what it sounds like. It is a huge collection of magic tricks having to do with playing cards. Now, I know at the beginning of this entire 5-foot shelf of magic, I recommended the Card College series because it gives you all of the finer points of handling cards. And it's great. I still recommend it. But I think this book can live on the same 5-foot shelf because it introduces you to all different types of card magic in a much more abbreviated style. So while Card College will help you learn the sleights in a very detailed manner, the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks focuses more on teaching you a quick sleight and then getting you right into the tricks that will use them, and it does so in that old school compact writing format. Hugard helped to write many other books, and we've referenced earlier his Magic Monthly, the magazine that ran for so long. He co-authored The Royal Road to Card Magic, one of the other best-known introductions to card magic, and Expert Card Technique. Now, the reason I chose the Encyclopedia of Card Tricks as the one to recommend is just because of how vast the coverage is and the types of things that you'll learn. I think it gives a lot of bang for the buck, and if you decide that you like reading Gene Hugard books, well, then there's plenty of others to choose from to expand your library. At the end of the day, that's really what this is about. This 5-foot shelf of magic is an introduction to magic, but I don't think you need to stop at 5 feet. So if while you're reading these, especially these older authors, you get interested, then I recommend you head down that rabbit trail to search out more from that particular magic creator who might just end up being one of your mentors. Speaking of mentors, if you haven't already, check out this video about how a magic book can help mentor you. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching. And until next time, keep reading.